been a great few days, huh? I enjoyed myself for sure. It's been 4 really, really intriguing days with some really inspiring speakers, inspiring work on the walls, great people at workshops. So I'm excited to be standing here today to present what's the evolution of an intriguing style. That could be applied to different styles, but this is the story of how I developed what is my signature work today as it stands. There's 4 segments to this lecture. I'm going to show you my signature pieces done throughout my career. That's the first bucket. Then I'm going to go back to my early work, how I found my passion for photography and how that evolved. And then I'm going to show you the pictures of the last 18 or so months of my work. I find it more intriguing, so to say, to show a period of time rather just my best work throughout my career. And then I'm going to get into how my pictures come together. Get a lot of questions pretty much every day online about how I put my pictures together. And I'm going to show you that whole process towards the end of the lecture. So if you have any questions, just bring them on. I'm going to start with where I started, which is here, my very first commercial assignment. Now this lecture is going to be fairly commercially based. I'm a commercial photographer and I work a lot in that realm. So you're going to start with my very first assignment. This is some personal work from my hometown of Trondheim, Norway. This assignment was about tools that doesn't really move as fast as they should. Personal work shot in Watson Lake, Arizona. One of my signature pieces, a fisherman photographed in Northern California in Mendocino. Swedish soccer player shot for Puma. Done for Spanish tourism. I worked a lot in Spain throughout my career. World champion kite surfer. We'll come back to this series of pictures a little bit later, but this was done for Genentech. Union Pacific. I do a lot of hospitality work, and this was done for IHG, which is the largest hotel chain in the world. They have Holiday Inn, Intercontinental, Crown Plaza, and we traveled around the world shooting beaches for them for almost 2 months. This is Mauritius, Malta, Thailand. This is maybe 2-3 years back when I was asked to be a part of the Absolute Vodka campaign. It's visually maybe one of the strongest, longest running photographic campaigns in US history, and it was an honor to be a part of it. This is done for Dassault Systèmes, France's largest employer. Again, about things that's not quite possible to achieve. This is done for Toyota. Personal work for Mauritius. Casinos in China. Entertainment work with 24. We'll get back to my process, but this is a lot of CGI created in the summer for a winter campaign. Created in the winter for a summer campaign. I do some fashion work in between, doing editorials. I'll come back to storytelling, which I try to utilize in all my work. This is Durmar Square, which unfortunately got ruined in an earthquake about 1.5 years ago. This is on the wall inside my gallery. These are dioramas, and then the people are photographed separately. Some recent work done for Don Julio Tequila. And that's who I am as a photographer. That's the work that I do. And this is how stuff like this come together. Thank you. Yeah, I'm getting there. Getting there. I know. All right, so that's who I am. That's what I do. Thank you. Oh, thanks. So I'm going to take you on this little journey through my early work and then talk to the stages of photography that really developed me into the craft that I'm performing today. It started with sports and skiing. Didn't really have much interest in photography at all. I was a DJ, and what got me up in the mornings after working all night was fresh snow and powder and getting onto the slopes. So that's where it started. And I was about 21, I kind of hit the wall and I thought, what am I doing with myself? This is not who I want to be and what I'm about. So I started thinking about what I would do next. And I thought, well, taking these ski pictures, photography would be fun. So within a couple of months only, I decided to really change my life. And I moved to the US to study photography. And the intention through 4 years of school pretty much was to do sport photography. I thought, okay, I could go home, get a job at the local newspaper, and travel the world taking sports pictures. So my focus was in school doing sports, and I photographed the 49ers, the Golden State Warriors. I did some boxing. I'm a Norwegian guy. And then a teacher came into my life, and she really changed the trajectory of what I was doing. She gave me this assignment called The Poetic Talent of a Glance. And this is really the first step in the evolution of my style. I went from taking pictures, being an observer, snapping sports action, which is really about just paying attention and hitting the shutter when the peak action happens. I felt that was taking pictures. Then I got this assignment, go and take a picture of that. It makes your mind go, what is this picture? It's almost impossible to photograph something that speaks to the poetic talent of a glance, but that was our assignment. And suddenly I started thinking about photography very differently. It was not about capturing something that happened, it was creating something that had an emotion or a feeling. From then on, photography wasn't about having this sort of fun, adventurous life. I'm going to travel and shoot sports. It became about creating, about finding something within myself that had this feeling of a poetic talent of a glance and try to capture that on film. So I started doing portraiture instead. This is my grandfather, and the older I get, the more like him I do get too. Bushy eyebrows, less hair. I shot authors, thinking about what I could say about them. This is my teacher of symbology and mythology at school. I photographed a priest and asked her if she could walk on water, and she said, great, I'd love to walk on water. I look back at my early work, right, this is some fashion stuff, and it's still the same I do today. The themes of what I was attracted to early on, which was people in their environment, and fashion work is what I do today as well. And we're going to speak about that, what it is about us that early on recognizes certain pieces within ourselves that we're attracted to and have to consistently tap into that as our craft matures. I'm going a little faster. Usually I do this over 2 hours. I'm going to pack it all into 1 hour today. So this is a self-portrait, and I did this in 1995. I had a father that was an engineer, and I thought, since I'm going to art school, every semester I'm going to take a computer class. Didn't even think of the consequences of that. I just did it because I thought it would please my parents. It was probably the best decision I did when it came to my schooling, because I had traditional photography education, and at the same time, I had these computer classes. And this was very early on. It was Photoshop 1.0. And as Photoshop developed, the more and more people started using it, my skill set it developed, and I was really, I think, a part of the very first generation of photographers that utilized Photoshop as an extension of their pictures. Before this generation really that started in 96, 97, there was the computer geeks that explored with this stuff, and there were the photographers, and sometimes they would collaborate and they came together and created something cool. But for me, starting in an environment, a school where they really embraced digital arts, I got to be a part of this class that really used the computers as an extension of the pictures we were taking. It wasn't just about the picture, it was about what we could do with it after as well, to extend that vision that we originally had. And that started with a self-portrait. Monk did the Scream, and I did Me Drowning. That vision or that idea of creating something after continued through my first years after school, and I took this picture. I talked about themes that would surface in your photography as you seek your voice or just take pictures that you're excited about. And when I sat down at the computer with a scanned film and looked at this piece, I thought, wow, everything that I want to do and I'm attracted to in pictures and in art is in this photograph. And everything I've done really since then is a reincarnation of this picture, or a reincarnation of what has become my style. When we all take pictures, there's certain themes that start surfacing. You might not see it, you might not recognize it right away, but when you look back at it, you will see it pretty clearly. And for me, that recognition came with this single photograph. I recognized all the stuff that I've been seeking surfacing in one image. What I realized later on is that that longing for that expression wasn't random. So I'm from Norway, grew up traveling a lot in the mountains with my grandparents, and looking at Norwegian art and painting, it's a very, very, very similar color palette, tonality, and sense of story in these paintings. When I took this photograph, I had no recollection of seeing those pictures earlier in my life. But looking back at it, I was wondering, why am I doing what I'm doing? What is this thing inside of me that keeps resurfacing? And now it's pretty obvious when I look at what I grew up with. When I took this picture on the right, I was asked to do a series of fashion stories within a museum, and I thought, oh, I want to shoot these dioramas, and I'm going to stick a girl on that polar bear. And later I realized that one of the old myths of Norway is about this princess on a polar bear. Another Norwegian famous painting on the top left. When I took the picture on the bottom right, I just took it because it was exciting. It felt good to me. And then later on in my career, when I wonder why, I recognize why. We have come to 3-4 years after I was done with school, and now I've been in the US for 7-8 years. And these pictures are fairly random, but I just finished this series. It was a fashion story for a San Francisco magazine. And at that time, I'd struggled quite a bit to make it as a photographer. I had finished school, I was assisting, I was knocking on doors, gotten a few jobs, but it didn't really take me anywhere. I was struggling, and I thought, okay, I'm going to move back to Norway. I'd done enough work to succeed there. I could come home, be a local hero coming home from the US. And I decided to move back when I dropped off these pictures at this magazine, and I come down on the street and I'm heading towards my car, and there's this Indian gentleman with a turban, a blue one, and he stares at me as we pass each other on the street. And I walked by him and I thought, that was strange. He looked at me so intently. So I turn around, and the guy has turned around as well. And he looks at me, and he comes up to me and he says, "You're thinking about leaving this place. You think you want to go somewhere else. If you do, you would want to come back here, but then it's too late for you. Just keep on doing what you're doing, and everything that you worked hard for will come true for you." I get goosebumps telling this story every time. So I left that place elated, and I thought, oh my God. He told me several other things too about me and my family. And I thought, okay, I'm going to stick it out. I'm going to be here and work really hard. And less than half a year later, 4 or 5 months later, there was an article published about me that changed my career completely. I'm not telling this story because I think everyone would walk around having some fortune teller come and tell you that you should continue on your path. But besides finding my identity, having the tenacity to continue on my path is probably the most important thing in my career. I think if I'd left the US at that point and gone home and not powered through what was a little bit of resistance, I would not be where I am today executing my craft. Perseverance is maybe the biggest thing in developing your style. I put a black slide up there. We had come to 2009. We're 7 years back. And it got a little slower, right? High flying, coming off the guy with the turban, got a lot of work, and 2008 rolls around and it gets really quiet. And I thought, I'm going to use this time to get a better photographer. And I sat down looking at other people's work. And I thought, what is it in the people that I admire? What is it in their pictures that I'm lacking in my own? So I started writing down what it is that I see in other people's pictures that turns me on. I wrote anything from color to light to who the people were, to the stories they told, to the emotion that people expressed, and I had a long list of things that I would do to make myself better. And what I realized afterwards is that it's a really extraordinary way in tuning into what you want to accomplish as a photographer. We all seek our vision. Yeah, we had this panel 2 nights ago. It was really informative even for me moderating the scene, to sit there and listen to the other photographers talk about how they execute their style and what they think of it. For me, looking at these old magazines, now I do it online and just sample pictures, but I still do this. I try to define to myself what I need to do to become better. And as soon as you define what you love, you really define your vision and your style within photography. You can find yourself in other people's work. And it's not just photography. You could do that in any other profession, really. After sitting there with all that work, I wrote this little manifesto for myself. To improve my images further, I want to be curious about my subjects and connect with them in a way that exposes something both about them and myself. To make it a collaboration and a true interaction rather than me observing and capturing. I felt till that time that I'd been observing. I'd been looking at things and yes, applying my color palette, applying the light that I liked, but never really connected perfectly with the people in front of me. And I still don't. I'm still kind of reserved when it comes to my work. I like those quiet moments, but to get better, I still seek to be curious and create curiosity, an invested interest on my part about the people and places I photograph that has a storytelling aspect that lingers. My images today are beautiful observation and interpretations. By adding true emotion from the people I photograph, I hope to further invite my subjects into the images and make the pictures as much about myself, much about them as myself. And it's still true today. There's an energy when you photograph both landscape and people. That just doesn't come from you, it comes from the other side of the camera as well. And if you can invite that into your picture, magic happens. All the big photographers, yeah, the Avedons, the Leibovitzes, the Irving Penns, they all have this intangible component to their pictures. And that's not because they light better or they take better pictures. It's because they manage to extract something from their subject matter, it being a landscape or it being a person. I want to create curiosity. To create curiosity, I would like to make the moment of capture a part of the unseen moments taking place before and after. I want to add elements that keep the story more open-ended, enticing the viewer to engage in the story and ask their own questions. I still aspire to do all of this today. Very much so. So I figured I got to practice. I never showed this work anywhere but in this lecture. And I still shoot these portraits. And it's for me to exercise that little piece that I feel is missing in my work. To connect with people, I started shooting people on white. Nothing really extraordinary in the portraiture. but it's exercising myself to get better. Storytelling. And now I'm starting to get some traction to what I feel is touching on asking questions, creating curiosity. What is going on before and what is going on after? I was moving from San Francisco to New York, and I thought, okay, I'm going to make it in the Big Apple, make a really good run for the big time. So I was looking in New York, on Manhattan, for an apartment, and I didn't really like Manhattan. It was too intense, too claustrophobic. It didn't feel like me, basically, who like open-ended vistas. I ended up in Brooklyn, so I thought I'm going to do a travel story about going from one place that's confined to another place that's more open. And it became about this woman coming across to Brooklyn and finding her love affair. A song that have always intrigued me is the Eagles' Hotel California. If you Google that online, there's a million interpretations of that song. It's really open-ended. That song is inspiring, and it asks questions. So I would do my own story about Hotel California, coming to it, checking in. The story to me became about the subconscious. You could check in, but you can never leave. You can never leave yourself. Water is symbolizing the subconscious. You would dive into it, resurface, rebirth, and never leaving. So me exploring that part of myself and the things that I wanted to get better at led to doing commercial work that had those elements to it. I'm going to go through quite a few commercial assignments as we go into it. More stories. One of my signature pieces, or this whole story is, it's an art heist. How could I tell a story about someone going away in the film noir look? She steals it, she runs off, the PI gets the phone call, they chase her down, she buries her loot, and she gets caught. That leads to more commercial work. Same film noir feel, not maybe as interesting, but for work, you get to execute pictures that resonates with who you are and what you're interested in. A lot of the work that I do today commercially, they come to me and say, hey, we have these ideas. Can you execute these ideas for us in your style? And that's what this is an example of. As I started creating these pieces that resonated with me, my upbringing, they started traveling, and an art director saw this, and it became the largest assignment of my career till that time. Credit Suisse called and said, we saw these diorama pictures that you took. Can you create these dioramas for us as well? And I said, sure. £250,000 to create one picture. That's what happens, I think, when you manage to tap into what's uniquely yours and you have a vision and you have a style. Remember the picture of Natalia in the water, the one that looked like a Norwegian painting? Another client came to me and said, hey, can you recreate that for us? Went to Hawaii and shot a series of pictures for this resort. So, I'm going through this a little quicker than normal, but to sum up, define to yourself what you're drawn to and see and understand light and make rather than take. The making rather than taking is the thinking about the ideas rather than just capturing what's in front of you. See and understand light was really for me the Natalia in the water picture, where all those elements of what I was drawn to, the light quality and the color came together as one. Connect with the place and person you are photographing. I think I talked enough about that for you guys to get the point of connecting being the one thing that's intangible in a photograph that really makes it more so than a flat surface. And then there's the photograph pictures, to shoot, and exercise that muscle that we have, that's a visual one. Any questions so far? If you have any questions, if you're curious about something, just let me know, okay? So when I started speaking or talking, it was because of my old teacher at school. He invited me to come back to my class and speak about my experiences after school. I've done that now for a good 16 years. In the beginning, it was really flattering. I thought, oh, I'm going to get to come back to my class and speak to what I've accomplished. After a while, I realized that it's the best thing I've ever done. If you read self-help books, they talk about positive reinforcement and they talk about looking at what you have accomplished rather than thinking about the stuff that you don't accomplish. And that's what these moments became for me. To go back and do these lectures and speak about what I'd done in the last few years. And it became this amazing reinforcement for me that I could sit there and show people what I'd done, but also show myself what I'd accomplished. So if you feel like you're not going anywhere with your photography, show friends or family what you have done the last year. And I think it will be quite revealing to yourself that we are actually moving forward. And that's why I still, when I talk, like to show the pictures that I've done in a period of time. Instead of just showing my best work, I'm going to show you what I accomplished in what is now the past 18 months or so. This was an assignment that spoke to overcoming. We all heard the expressions to be run over by a truck or hit by a bull, to be struck by a train. And this campaign spoke to that idea, to stand strong and not let yourself be run over. I had to photograph Ophelia. There's amazing, amazing incarnations of this one theme, and this was mine. I'm going to show you some work in here that I'm not going to speak too much about, but it's stuff I do for a living. Not the most romantic always, but still it allows me to create in my aesthetic and in my style. This is done for a Norwegian clothing company. So this was a personal series of pictures for me that started with a breakup. And using adversity to create is quite amazing. So when you find that you don't want to create for some reason, that's when you should do it. When you're in the toughest position in life, that's when creativity really flourishes. I have a journal. I've been writing journals since '96. And I write more when I'm sad, more when I'm in trouble, more when I want to accomplish stuff and I feel like I don't get there, than when I'm perfectly content. When you're content, usually it's tougher to create because then there's no need to. So when you feel that need to create, you have to let that happen. For me, it was a breakup, and it starts with the conversation breakdown. Then this is the end of the relationship, which was a crash. Then there was me looking out to the vista, wondering what's going to happen next. And then this is the wise old man. Obviously, these have different characters to it, but it's really me telling my story of ending a relationship and starting anew. And then the wise old man is our Gandalf. It's the Yoda. It's the person that we all find to come give us advice. It's the guy with the blue turban that came to the street in San Francisco to me and told me that I had to persevere. So I don't just create one picture anymore. I try to create small little stories around them. So here's this woman in the car. She takes off. She crashes. She leaves. You're going to get into this, but to give you a taste of what's to come with these pictures, this is how they are created. I start with the background. You can't really crash the car. So I put it in a studio, create the atmosphere of a crash, and then blend the pieces together on the computer. The wise old man, he's on a train. The woman is on a train. He comes to the rescue, and they take off. The woman that I showed in my black and white pictures that I mentioned was my teacher in my mythology class. She opened my eyes to a world that we see, or the world behind what we see in the movies. As a species, we all thrive on storytelling. Every religious book, every mythology out there relies on storytelling, and they all follow a certain set of rules, so to speak. And Joseph Campbell wrote this book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and it explains sort of the story arc of all these stories. And that's been crazy inspirational for me as I try to create my own pictures. Commercial work for a pillow manufacturer, clouds and water. This is the Roots party scene. Personal work that will eventually become a book that I'm collaborating with my girlfriend on. Last year was extraordinary when it came to travel. And this will take us from September of last year through early this year, where I photographed in New York, in Miami, Costa Rica, this is New England, Hong Kong, New Zealand, Buenos Aires, Amsterdam, Barcelona, Rome, Venice, Dubrovnik, my hometown of Norway, London, this is Mozambique, and these other pictures I created in these places. This is all assignment work. I have to speak to this image for a moment because I feel so extraordinarily blessed. I'm excited to be a commercial photographer. I get a lot of questions about what you do with art versus commerce. I just get honored when people come to me and say, hey, we want to give you money to execute your photography. Yes, as you've seen in some of these pictures, it's not, artwork in it, but I get to apply myself. I get to be a collaborative environment, and I really thrive on that. When people say they want to send me around the world to the mountain in New Zealand to capture a picture like this, I go, for sure I will. This is a composite, the people are photographed afterwards, but the rest of the landscape is not. We were in New Zealand for 5 days to capture this one image, and we had given ourselves time because we knew the weather would be funky. We waited and waited and waited, and at 1 o'clock this morning, we were flying to Buenos Aires. This was the last chance we had, and then we had a glimmer of sun in the morning. We got into the helicopter again and flew to the top, and as we came up there, the clouds were just hovering. The helicopter put me down, the skies parted, and just the sun came out, and it's one of those most extraordinary moments that one can have as a photographer. And to have someone pay me to do this is just absolutely magnificent. Alaska, Rome. This picture is photographed maybe 5-minute drive from my house in Sonoma, California. Venice, Dubrovnik. This is Mozambique. I had a trip to India a few months back, and this is all a personal trip that I took together with my girlfriend. If one want to go to a place of contrasts, go to India. I don't think there's anywhere where one can find the burning of bodies in one place and the celebration of life a few meters down the river. It's just absolutely extraordinary. One gets so stirred and taken out of one's comfort zone. Makes one rethink everyone one knows. Then we were off to Spain, shooting commercial work. So this is a personal series. Always been fascinated by crossing over in water and then flying. I have a multitude of different flying images, and this was a series I did on gliders. So you're going to get into the way I work a little bit. Any questions, by the way? Sorry, 18 minutes to go. Any questions before we continue? Yes. So she asked, where do I get my ideas from? Is it the customer that comes up with the idea, or are they my own? And it's both. When I do commercial work, at the level that I work in the US, they usually have months and months of research that goes into the ideas that represent their brands the best. So when they come to me, they usually have a very clear idea of what they want to execute, and they ask if I could do so in my style. But then for my own work, it comes from everywhere. I think music and reading are the two biggest sources, and to access it, I run, and I meditate, and I shower. Those are the places where I really sort of have my ideas surfacing. I put Photoshop as an extension and a tool because a lot of people come to me and they ask all about process, but it's not just that. It's really a way to use Photoshop, as I mentioned, as an extension. So I use it more to solve problems and to execute a vision than to just use it for the sake of using it. This is a campaign for Ritz-Carlton, and we wanted to have this line inside the gym. This is the Lakers Stadium, downtown Los Angeles, and they say there's no way you're going to have a lion on our basketball floor. So the solution then is to take a lion and photograph it in studio and then put the pieces together. So in a lot of my work, I really see myself as a problem solver. This was a clothing campaign, and we came to this, it's almost like a rainforest, and there is a lot of rain, but we thought we would have clear days, but that didn't happen. It just rained and rained and rained and rained. These are the pictures. This is what it really looked like. So as a photographer that uses Photoshop, I could say, let's make this happen anyway. Let's set up two tents, me under one, the model underneath another. A few days prior, I'd scouted this location. So I took my old scouting plates. There's the background from a few days before. Color treatment, a foreground element, the girl underneath the tent. And here's the picture put together. A lot of my work is in the Photoshop realm, but I also do other stuff where we build sets. Again, it's solving problems and telling stories. These are the pictures, and this is how we did it. All right. I'm going to come into this section called This Is How It's Done, where I'm going to show you the layouts. You asked about where the ideas come from, how we execute it, and all the pieces and parts that goes into each picture. First, a little bit about our shoots. And these are the pictures we created. This is often what it looks like when I get campaigns in the door. We want to speak to stuff that we could do while we're traveling on a train, commuting. It was about sleeping. As we developed the campaign, it became about reading. So I go out, I shoot a background landscape, I shoot some clouds, a book, and a train. That's what it ended up looking like. And this is how it's coming together. I showed you this picture in the introduction. This is done for Spanish tourism. And this is the idea that they came to me with. They wanted to show shopping in Barcelona in the background. They wanted some Barcelonian architecture. This is us in the streets of Barcelona. One big thing to this was that the architecture needed to be shown, but we also wanted to create some depth in the photograph. As you see in the top line, there is no depth to it at all. And then you see in the second line, there's a separate street. So to create both those elements, architecture and depth, we photographed two different pieces and stitched them together. This is the final image, and this is how it's put together. This is the idea that they came to me with. And I get a lot of questions about what I do first and what I do after. When you do complex composites like this, I always start with the background, what I call the unmovable plate. It's the one thing that decides the light quality and the perspective for every other element that comes after. So I did this rough thing and said, okay, how does this feel as a background, as a light quality, as a shape? And on top of this, I build it. I photograph these pieces for the happy side, these pieces for the dark side, and that's the final image. This is how it comes together. Oh, thank you. How do I top that? So this is Union Pacific, which is the largest railway in the US. This is the idea they came to us with. When we came to this farm, the top picture on the left is what was scouted. Usually when I get these assignments, we send location scouts out to these areas and say, you go out, show us what we can, what's there in the area, and if there's anything that looks and feels like the layout or the idea. They came to me with the top left. Now further down on the farm, you see underneath my hand there, you see the farm small in the background. And again, it's using the computer to execute maybe something that's better. Not settling for the one on top left, but using the textures of the grass and then putting the two together. So if you have one camera close to the barn, one further away, and then you can't really art direct cows. So we photograph the cows separately. That's the final image. showed you this earlier. This is the layout. This is what I got in the mail when they said, hey, we think you would be really appropriate for this assignment. This is our idea. This is what we executed for them. And here are the different elements. Doesn't look like this is playing. Let me see. Oh, I put this in there already, so you've seen this one coming together. CGI is starting to creep into my work quite a bit, and that truck that you saw in the previous image was created on a computer, and it's starting to get pretty seamless with what they can do. This was a dream that my girlfriend had. She said, I walked into this basement, there was this guys lined up, there was a janitor fixing some mirror, and as she explained this, I thought, man, this is a beautiful photograph. We should take a picture of this. How do we create it? This was my interpretation of it. I started thinking about a more dreamy sort of staircase. I talked to my CGI artist about this, and he came back with the comp on the left. I said, no, the stairs got to be more dreamy. I did the illustration on the right. And then we start photographing. This is what it looks like. Whenever I do these pictures, I always do sort of a quick comp on set. So this is me trying to fuss with it, low resolution, and that's the final photograph. This is a cover of Fortune magazine a few years back, and we could speak more to this if there's any questions about it later. Usually I speak to the changing of the marketplace and how we all got to do different things now, but for taking still pictures. So the essence of it is that we don't really work as still photographers anymore in the commercial world. We work with we are someone that will create a full social media chain, really, that will drive from advertisement to website to market site to social media to creating brand relationships and brand loyalty. So that is my job, not just a photographer anymore. And with that comes the execution of campaigns that is multi-format, still picture. These are photographed in Namibia, and this is the video piece to go with it. The big thing about this, when we speak to establishing a creative style, is that this style needs to carry through both mediums. That's the still picture. And this is the video to go with it. Obviously expanded quite a bit, but it has the same story. I have one more of these, but I'm not going to show the whole video, but this is a winery series I did, and then there's a video to go with it that shows pretty much exactly the same still images and video images. But I'm going to end the lecture, since we have 2.5 minutes left, with what we created over the past 2 days in my workshop. Just to explain a little bit, I went out to the Red Dunes the other day, wanted to bring some water into the desert, and all these are composed together: the water, the girl, the camel, and the boat, and the flag, and the sky. And that's what I've been teaching here the last 2 days. And that sort of sums up my lecture, and we're on to the question, if there's any. If you go through the galleries here, there's just mind-blowing, extraordinary photography. Some of it that's not manipulated whatsoever. Some of it having crazy extensive techniques, right? When you look at the microphotography of these little insects, was it 800 pictures to create one picture? So he uses one set of tools to create that expression. I'm using one set of tools to create my expressions. And then there's the photojournalists, like Mohammed, the AP photographer, who I was blown away by. I mean, those portraits from those refugee camps are so touching and so extraordinary in their emotional content. You can't compete with that in this composite photography, but it's not who I am as a person, right? I'm balanced, I don't really see conflict, quieter. So for me, these dreamscapes, as I call them, you know, people flying in clouds and all, that's my way of expressing myself. So do you have to be... You can be successful in every avenue of photography, I think. It's not one way or road to success. The road to success is really expressing who you are. So that's part of this lecture, right? To show that the development happens by knowing who you are, right? And finding what turns you on as a photographer. That's when you're successful. If you try to do what I do, you wouldn't be perfectly successful at it because you wouldn't be honest in that expression. When you're honest to yourself and who you are, that's when you will flourish. That's when you will be excited about what you're creating, and that's when you will be successful. All right. I'm super grateful to Xposure and to Simon that brought me here. It's been a true honor. It's been a lot of fun this last 4 or 5 days. So thank you. I'm grateful, and I hope to see you next year maybe. Thank you.